Welcome to the House by the Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today by Derek.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing the 1991 Addams Family film, the Addams Family film that had Raul Julia and Angelica Houston and Christina Ricci, Christopher Lloyd, a movie that I think it's the best-selling, the pinball machine that was made about the Addams family is the best-selling pinball machine ever, with over like, I forget how many, like 20 million.
That's a weird piece of trivia.
Or not 20 million, 20,000.
This dates this movie to being in the late 80s, early 90s, because that's like when pinball was like, you know, when I remember, because like, you know, I still remember pinball was like probably 5 or something. You still had them on different places, but I do remember that one, because remember like Pizza Hut had it and a couple other places.
I'm trying to see how many, but it was like the pinball machine sold over 20,000 units. Because I remember that being everywhere, and they still, like, whenever you go to like the arcade expos or you go to like the barcades that have pinball and stuff, almost all of them always have the Addams Family machine.
Before that, and as far as video games go, before this movie and stuff, I played Fester's Quest. Did you guys ever play that?
No.
It was an NES game. It was, you know, the weird thing about it too is it was licensed before the movie, so like it was like an old TV show at that point that was just reruns, because I think it was licensed for cheap. But a lot of people hate it. I liked it. I guess she's like my mom's cousin's boyfriend at the time. I don't know what he was doing, but he was always hanging out at my grandma's house. And he was like, we play games together, and he was like, Fester's Quest, it's like the best game ever. So like we hunted for that game forever, and then found it next to like Video Vault, like the Kroger's on Dixie, you know, and like bought a copy there. And like I liked the game, but yeah, it's very hard and just weird. Like aliens come, so Fester has to like stop the aliens. Like it's one of those things. Yeah, it's just one of those NES games that make no sense.
Yeah, they just got a licensed character and they made a game.
Let's see. Yeah, so the Addams Family. So we'll discuss spoilers throughout, because it's one of those movies that there's not a lot you can really spoil. It's mostly just the experience of watching it that you have to kind of enjoy. And two, it was directed by Barry Sonnenfeld, who has directed some other stuff like Men in Black.
It was his first film. If you notice, the title sequence is very similar to the font. The style of the text is exactly the same, this and Men in Black. But he was a DP before that. He was a DP on Misery. Now I'm drawing a blank, but just he worked with a lot of, I think, great directors before that.
This is a movie that I believe is purely cast driven, because like the storyline in this is
the story. It's
super 1990s, because in 1990, late 80s, early 90s, it was amnesia was everything. So if you watch Unsolved Mysteries and somebody went missing, it was amnesia or the satanic cult, and this is amnesia.
And in most of the amnesia cases were fake. I mean, the basic story is that you have the Addams family is there, in their home, and the brother Fester of Gomez Addams is missing. He's been missing for like 25 years.
But in the TV show, it was Morticia's uncle, actually. Yeah. But they changed it in the movie.
Yeah. So Fester's been missing for 25 years, and some people, there's somebody that looks like Fester that they're going to try to scam them with to get money and get their, treasure, their house or whatever. So, it's basically, as Derek said, the plot. When you sit, because like I've seen this movie a bunch. I remember seeing it in theaters. I remember watching it on home video, and I'm like, I still don't remember what the plot for this movie was. And then I watched it, and like, it really doesn't matter, and it doesn't make a ton of sense. And the fact that they changed some of the stuff at the last second, because the cast went to the director and said, "Hey, there's this one big change we want you to make, because otherwise we don't think the movie's as enjoyable." And then they made the change, and.
You're talking about like him actually being the uncle?
Yes.
Yeah. Apparently they did it before shooting, though, like 2 weeks before.
Well, because apparently like the cast wanted it to be changed, so they had Christina Ricci at like 10 years old be the one that went to the Barry Sonnenfeld.
Which is a kid that was I was kind of confused, because I'm like, is it, you know what I mean? Like because if you don't pay attention to the end where they specifically say, oh, he got amnesia, you know what I mean? Like you don't know. And as a kid, that was like always a point that kind of disappointed me a little bit.
That it was Fester? Or
No, that like, through the film, like I was kind of always unsure. Like after the first time I saw it in theaters too.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, was that Fester? But you're a kid, you just miss stuff. Well, and two, like the fact that he wasn't just Fester throughout the film. Yeah. As a kid, I was like, I want to see the whole family together, just being the family. Yeah. But
we were talking about, like, I have seen this probably quite a bit, but what I've always seen is Addams Family Values,
where they
which
have the
is
baby.
the second. And I always remember that one. So like when I watched this one, it's kind of weird because I think overall this was the more critically successful movie. It made more money. And the second one I think was not really it was I think a flop. I think it made what it was the budget value. So it's just weird. The second one had a longer life on like TV and other stuff, whereas like this one I can't really remember the last time I've seen.
Well, I mean, and two, this came like a lot of movies from this era have a similar feeling, even if they're not similar subject matter whatsoever. Because for some, it might just be the pinball machines, but Bram Stoker's Dracula and this and the Addams Family, to me, they feel connected somehow.
Yeah,
because they came out like in the same few year period, despite having nothing in common story wise.
I guess two of the writers worked on two different Tim Burton films, and Tim Burton was up to be a director for this, but Barry Sonnenfeld was not the first choice apparently. And I guess I guess the producer kind of did him a favor and let him take a shot at directing, which I think he did a phenomenal job.
And then
I always kind of feel like this, to me personally, is more connected in the Beetlejuice universe.
This, I mean, honestly, like aside from Beetlejuice, like as far as that Tim Burton this is like, I like the Addams Family movies better than pretty much any sort. Like I bet I like it better than Edward Scissorhands. You know what I mean? Than a lot of Tim Burton films.
But too though, like this cast in this movie is killer. Like Gomez, I can't pronounce his name right. I forgot how
Ron Julia.
But you could not pick that to me is like
no.
Gomez.
The cast is phenomenal, but also too, I don't think you should diminish the writing to it, because I think the dialogue and the writing is so good. It is just an issue of kind of the main plot.
Yeah, the main plot's messy. It's a messy movie.
The thing that people talk about good writers do sometimes when they think of a concept is they get a whiteboard and they write down like all the things they could do. It really felt like with this, they like, what funny situation could we put the Addams Family in? You know what I mean? And it was like every little thing, and it feels like they had way more than enough to just make a sequel too, you know, as far as to build in the humor. And I think even just some of the dialogue, like I know there's some lines where I am missing some of the jokes just because of the language used, you know, like I know there's so many great lines in this film that I remember even just from the trailers before this movie came out. This was maybe the first film that I remember seeing in theaters. And it wasn't even with my parents. Somebody, like a neighbor, was going to take us and the neighborhood kids to a movie, and they asked, like, what do you all want to see? And normally I don't say anything. I'm just like, oh, I'll just go along, whatever. But I remember specifically saying, please, can we go see the Addams Family? Yeah. And we walked in, like, I had to look. We walked in like 7 minutes in, so I was upset that we missed the first half. But this time I'm like, oh, it really wasn't that far into the movie. It was like when she's cutting the rose. Like, that's the first thing I probably ever saw in a theater was her cutting that rose.
I think the thing that
wasn't a drive-in.
That I remember the most about this isn't the movie itself. Like, Christopher Lloyd as Fester, I used to have a nightmare, and you'll remember this a little bit because it's about the house you grew up in. And in the basement, like we moved into our grandparents' house once they moved out, and there's like a pink box in the basement. It's in the back room, like the storage room. So I'd follow like Fester into the basement, and then I'd open up the pink box, and what's the hand's name?
Thing
would jump onto my face. And I had that dream so many damn times. So I was like terrified of that room with the pink box in it, because it was like something of my grandma's. But you have any idea what the pink box I'm talking about is? 'Cause it's still down there. Next time I'll show you.
You need to get that pink box.
Yeah. But it is, and that's not an innuendo. Yeah. It is funny that like just reading up on this, like at the time, the Addams Family was seen as like the smaller, lesser known property compared to the Munsters.
I know the Addams Family a lot better.
But I think a lot of that is the Addams Family movie came out in the early 90s, so it had all the associated video games and pinball machines and all the social, not social media, but like all the, like, you know, the tie-ins, the cultural relevance of it, as opposed to the Munsters was in syndication. And I remember watching the Munsters television show more. It seemed like that was more easily accessible than the original Addams Family.
I feel like the Addams Family was on a lot when I was very young. I mean, granted, this movie came out when I was 5, but I remember watching the Addams Family first, and then watching a lot of the Munsters too. And I did watch the Munsters more. I think the Munsters was shown a lot on TV Land, Nick at Night.
I mean, it is very odd that the Munsters just has not had a movie.
I mean, they had their TV movies. Like, I watched those. But yeah, no sort of remake. But the Addams Family too. I mean, the Munsters was a ripoff of the Addams Family. It was the Addams Family was a comic strip, I think, in the New Yorker that started in like 1938, and the creator's name, his last name was Addams, and it ran for like 50 years, but I think there was only like 150 comics or something, so it was like not that many per year. But it was all single panel, and apparently a lot of scenes in this film too were taken from that, like when they show the old video of like Gomez and Fester as like with the shark fins and stuff. That was apparently a single panel. And there's like, there's a bunch of those. And I think the opening of the film was a single panel of the trick-or-treaters or the carolers and the pot coming down. Like that's all that was. But yeah, so it was like based on the comic strip. Then he ended up, they ended up doing the TV show. But I think this film had the rights to the comic strip. So there was also some litigation between some of the creators of the TV show because they used some elements of that was created in that. You know what I mean? Like it was all, it gets messy like things do.
It's weird.
Well, because they had to apparently like figure out after the movie came out and was a big success, they had to clear up all the rights issues and pay everybody off so they could get a sequel in motion.
Yeah. Which the sequel is phenomenal too. I got to leave here shortly, but this is like probably, this was a film I watched tons and tons because one, I had the VHS of this and Addams Family Values. I don't know if I bought one outright, but I think Values, and maybe this one too, I got from McDonald's. Remember when they used to have VHSs?
Yes. Yeah.
I remember specifically, I think I was actually in the hospital or maybe visiting somebody. I think I was in the hospital just for a brief time. And as I was leaving, they had like the McDonald's and the Cozair downstairs. Yeah. And like, there was like, can you get me the Addams Family? Of course, you can get your parents to do anything for you when you're in the hospital. Yeah. I was like, can you get me the Addams Family from the McDonald's? And they pay like $16 with a value meal or something.
Yeah, because they had like the lower cost version or VHS that they sold there in the 90s for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I remember getting Back to the Future that way.
Yeah,
I did too.
Well,
I got a couple of those.
Future,
yeah.
The Happy Meal toys too.
Yeah.
The Addams Family is just because, like, again, like the plot on this is so messy because essentially, like, he went to the Bermuda Triangle and he gets amnesia, and a lady finds him and adopts him as her son, and she kind of pimps him out a little bit as like her muscle. And then the guy that played Richard Nixon in one movie is a lawyer in this. And he's
great. He was in Cheers a lot.
Yeah,
and
I just know
he was also in, did you ever watch Night at the Roxbury?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the dad in that too.
And he was dad in Clueless.
Yeah, he's so great.
I just remember him as there's a movie he played Richard Nixon in, and that's what I always think of him as. And he got killed in Commando.
Was it Dick?
Dick, yeah, I think so, yeah. But he's like, he needs money, and so they use Fester, but it turns out, and he's really Fester.
Because he owes money to a bookie, which is the woman that's posing as Fester's mom. And then
Which all seems very coincidental. You know what I mean? Like that happens to be Fester. Like
it's a messy plot, but the point of the movie really isn't the plot.
It's more the sight gags and so the main thing that I remembered about this movie from when I saw it initially was when Pugsley and Wednesday did the Thanksgiving play at school.
No, that was
a sequel.
They did
it wasn't the Thanksgiving.
Pirate.
They did the Pirates because they were cutting off limbs and blood was spraying everywhere. Because I always forget what was in what. Yeah, so the sequel was the one that had the Thanksgiving
I always
stuff.
there were so many moments. Like the one, basically it's a gag at the end when they ask what Wednesday is for Halloween, and she says, "I'm a homicidal maniac." That was like just like everybody. Like I remember as a kid thinking that was so genius. Like there's just so many little lines. And two, at the end they bring it in where Fester uses the light bulb in his mouth, which was always done in the TV show. There's just like, again, the writing I think is so good, and that's what makes, like, I think the actors are so great, but they can have so much fun with it too. And it's just, the humor is so smart. The art direction, just it just doesn't look cheap at all. Like, no, it looks great.
It doesn't feel cheap.
I mean, it feels spooky enough when it's supposed to. It
feels like a real world.
It walks such a fine line, and it also very much felt like a lot of the films of the '90s, which Addams Family was always built as this, and in the TV show too. And the Monsters, where they're this weird family and the kind of against the regular world. Yeah. But we had like the Brady Bunch, which is also pitted that. You know what I mean? There were so many films like that.
The one thing I like about this though is while they're weird, they don't think they're weird. Like they feel like what they do is normal. So like they go to auction to sell something in this, and then they buy the item back for a ridiculous amount of money, and then essentially they start having like sex almost in front of all these weird, but they don't think that's weird.
And I think they said that was like one of the first episodes too. Something like that happened.
So like, and that's why I kind of like this. And there's now I just watched Elvira's movie the other day. And the issue I have with that is because she kind of fits in like the Addams Family aesthetic of the way that she looks and stuff, because that came out a little bit before this movie, but it was sure I'm influenced by that some. But it's like she was like a social outcast and whatever, and it was like played so hard on that, and then she played it up too. Whereas I like where like they are kind of like social outcasts, they could care less and they think they're normal. They just do their thing, and
they think like, everybody else is the weirdo. Yeah, and it's so funny.
And I think that's why it works to me, because like it just felt natural. Yeah. And like I do enjoy that because there's like, oh, this is who we are and this is what we do, you know, like they go to the parent teacher conference and all these kids have these real nice drawings and get to Wednesday and it's this bloody witch on fire and she's like, oh, that's your great name, and it's just normal.
Yeah, she's like, oh yeah, I told her she can't do that until college first, you know. Again, like it's like they got a whiteboard and it was like, what's the funny situations we could put these specific, and it's only situations that was funny for the Addams family.
Yeah. Like
another one that I loved as a kid when because I used to watch Sally Jesse Raphael when Gomez is, you know, he's out of work or they're out of the house and he's watching it and it's about the brainwashing voodoo doctors or whatever, and then she's like, please Mr. Addams, quit calling, we don't know where they meet. Like I thought that was the funniest thing in the entire world when I was a kid. Like I think this so much defined like my sense of humor, you know, like it was like Ren and Stimpy, Addams Family, like all, you know, Beavis and Butthead, like it was just like that sort of.
This is so dark.
Yes.
But it's so normal to them. Like the mom walks in and Wednesday's got Pugsley strapped in an electric chair.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, let's go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
You know, like, and then they, like, Fester's getting out, like, when he's coming in to steal everything, he's getting, like, dynamite and a crowbar and a chainsaw. And she's
like,
oh,
arsenic.
And she's like, oh, did you think we'd run out? Yeah. And he's just like, ugh, puts it back. And it's like, that humor works because, like, first of all, Angelica Houston's just great.
Yeah.
But, like, it's just so normal.
I mean,
like,
Christopher Lloyd, could you have done better? Like, there was somebody that they were going to try to get besides Christopher Lloyd, but I mean, like,
well, I think Angelica Houston said that she thought that Cher was going to get the role of Morticia.
Yeah, Cher did want,
that
or
would be,
was going.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, Fester is just like, man, he is just. Yeah. Christopher Lloyd is so good at it.
Well, because he's so frantic.
Yes,
and he's just like. You know, but it's funny because, like, I always remember him obviously as Doc Brown, but like he is very good about not being. He doesn't feel like Doc Brown in this movie, and you know, because I'm saying a lot of times you get typecast, like,
and he doesn't feel like his character from Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
And that's what I like is like sometimes you can see people getting typecast in that because there's a lot of actors that we see that we even like that do different roles. It's like it's still like Will Ferrell is typically Will Ferrell in every single thing he's in, which I like. But like Christopher Lloyd as Fester felt like Fester. It didn't feel like Doc Brown in a bunch of makeup. You know, like it worked.
Marty.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Did you eat those eels, Art Marty?
Yeah, like that should have been a line of dialogue.
I mean, like the movie to me just feels like you don't, because like, so it's funny that Tim Burton was considered for this and didn't do it, and he later did Dark Shadows.
I'm so glad he didn't do this. Actually, only because I love both these films. Like I don't think he could have done anything better.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know what he would have done
want these films to be like they are.
I mean, like the artistic stuff, like the art
who would have been
direction.
Gomez Addams?
Yeah, Johnny Depp. Probably.
Yeah, well, that was pre Johnny Depp and everything.
But I mean, still though, he was, you know.
No, I mean, like the casting is perfect.
Or what
Raul
if it was Michael
Julia.
Keaton?
Okay, I would have taken that too. But no, Raul Julia is so good.
Yeah, he was great in that.
He's good.
He said he really loved doing this role too because kids would come up and recognize him, and you know he didn't live much longer after this.
Yeah,
and he said like
cancer.
that was like his one of his favorite roles, and he just like loved, you know, making people happy and kids
But
happy.
what I like about him is, and this goes to Street Fighter too, like when he goes into a role, he's seen choose in the best way. Like he enjoys doing it. He goes all out, and like he just really. I was like when he's like depressed, like he said, "Quick call." Like that's funny because like he believes that's a real thing, you know. And that's what makes it because to them that's like.
And he's like, you know, he like they know him on the show because he has nothing to do but sit there. And it, you know, I also thought like, is like you could almost remake this film, and obviously people have talked about Oscar Isaac and they're the animated one, but I'm saying like there's almost something to be said too when he gets out of that, like. He wasn't working before. No. Like, what is he depressed? You know what I mean? Like, they just had their house and all their wealth, and it's like almost like it could have almost been a commentary on extreme wealth and isolation, like what your family would turn into over the decades of if you never had to interact with the outside world. Like that's another angle to take this film now.
They just get into all the weird stuff.
You could absolutely like see how a family could develop into this if they were more like mostly isolated over all this time.
Well, one thing is, they had to be somewhat supernatural because like
the things they survive.
Because the things they survive, and like Fester's like incredibly strong. He gets blown up and a bunch of stuff. So it's like I guess there's some, you know,
it's like a cartoon kind of. You know what I mean? It's a whole cartoon aesthetic and feel and
But like, I just love there's some stuff that makes like no sense because like Fester when he finds everything out, he's trying to rob him. So he goes in to a little bookshelf room and he grabs a hold of a chain and it pulls him up. And then for some reason they're in Wednesday or Pugsley's room and you see him shoot through a water vent. And it's like, what? Like, where did they even come from? You know,
Well, I mean,
like
just
it
like-
made no sense.
It feels like this manic world. Yeah, that just like it does feel like a cartoon. And something else too, when I was talking about those, stuff like the Brady Bunch, where it's like, oh, they almost have their own world that they are a part of that is separate from the actual world.
Yeah.
But Barry Sonnenfeld also, Men in Black feels very much like that too, where it is this separate world that is part of the larger world.
And there is some stuff that kind of, it's funny you say, because there is some stuff that's similar. Because like I just remember like being a tube scene in
that's what made me think of that kind of that point. But yeah, it's like it's just this weird, like, again, that was based on a comic book, but it's just this weird, almost cartoon sensibility to both those films.
Yeah.
But they're also played straight, and that's what makes them so funny.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I just like, because it's like, hey, I like, because on this they could have went the route like, oh, we're so weird and we know it, but for them, I think that's why it works, because they don't play on that. And like I said, watching something like Elvira, where she's kind of
playing up the differences, and that shtick works for like a little bit, but not for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Whereas I think like this, they, even though they're different, like they still, it just played straight.
I think too, like, as we've already hit on a few times in this movie, I think that this is a movie where they didn't even really need a plot.
No,
they could have just had all these character moments, because a movie that came to mind in recent years was What We Do in the Shadows. The Jermaine Clement, Taika Waititi, documentary about vampires, because that movie didn't have much of an overarching plot. It was
just like to see what they did.
So it's almost like, I think if they were to redo an Addams Family almost in that vein, like Taika Waititi would be somebody good to do a live action Addams Family.
Good, yeah.
Because
it does feel like a series of sketches at times. Again, it's like, oh, let's put them in this situation, and now they're in a school, they're at a school play, they're out in the real world in a motel. You know what I mean? Like, they do all these things.
How many things you watch now? And like, I watch Bob's Burgers, and there's a Thanksgiving play that directly pulls from some of this. But like, you see though, the Pugsley and Wednesday have their battle, and it's just this huge, gory, epic, and all the parents. It's like, how many times now have we seen that happen?
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's like, it's just funny how.
Well, I love that, like, the Addams are sitting there not getting drenched in blood but enjoying it, and all the parents up front, they're getting drenched, are just like appalled.
Yeah,
but that's what just the sense of the humor was still there in those comics, and it's just like, I just am so curious about his inspiration. Addams, like, you know what I mean? Like, this sense of humor was very fresh even in the 90s, it felt like. Yeah. But it's like, to know that the comic, started more than 50 years back. More than 50 years back. Like, that was so... I don't know. It just feels so fresh at the time. And like, even now, like you said, so many people have copied off of this movie and just kind of some of the gags and jokes. But even at the time, like, this was pulling a lot from the TV show and from the comic strip, Yeah,
I just like, there's not really any. I mean, there's different stuff that are mine, but like anything with Fester, I think just the way they made him look, like, it's just memorable. And it just, I just like how he's just like, and he's just running around, and he's just like always frantic, and like, it's enjoyable. And then, but see, I think that I like when he had hair. Like, they need to have more Fester with hair, because that was just a weird, like, thing.
Yeah, I mean, because like the movie's very fun, and it just really evokes an era, because it was an era where you had all the kind of practical effects, and you would have like the matte stuff, the matte work, and the green screen, because the entire thing, like everything that's on screen, that's all effects. But it doesn't look bad. Like, when you rewatch it, I don't think if you've set some kids in front of the TV and turn that on now, that they would really be pulled too much out of it.
And this movie's paced well. It's not boring or bogged down with stuff. And I don't know if that's just maybe being more of a product of the 90s or what.
I think it being strongly in the comedy lane, versus like even like horror, like, it's a comedy horror kind of, but it feels more like a comedy. It's like macabre, but it is very much like, first and foremost, this is a comedy, so we're going to keep it funny the entire time, and it is, that's the ultimate goal. Because I think that's why it feels so quick and so fast paced.
But then there's also the weird scene where Gomez is mad because Fester doesn't like know some things he should know, so he's got the train set. And he's driving the train set around, and then they do an inside shot of the train set, and there's just a guy in there. And it's like, what's that about?
That apparently was a strip in the original comic,
too.
Really, like, it's just so like, funny. Like,
just,
what is this world?
It's so bizarre, and never talk about it again. And it's like, he's got his trains.
Again, that feels like Beetlejuice. That's Barry Sonnenfeld,
yeah.
too. That's the director, apparently. It was a director cameo, I believe.
Yeah. It's just really weird, because I I was watching, I was like, that's just like nothing else like that happened in the movie. So like, did he kill trains with real people in it? Like, I don't know, because there's a person.
It's like this weird kind of little story beat, and like you said, like this movie is the little sketches and the things that they have throughout are very entertaining. Well, like when the lawyer comes and Gomez like has the sword fight with them.
Yeah, it's normal.
But it seems like the lawyer's used to it.
Yeah, like they're friends. But then I love that, it sets up both those things. Like one, at Chekhov's book with the books.
Yeah.
And that comes in play at the end. And then the sword play, first it's friendly, then it is like combative by the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have these kind of like fun little things like that. We talk about like all the goofy stuff. Well, then like at the end, like when they because the biggest shortfall of the movie is the classic kind of 90s, even late 80s, like, or even kids movies today. They set up the kind of weak villain. They set up kind of they set up kind of like the weak conflict in a lot of the movies, because the idea was their lawyer owed money to a bookie, so he was going to have the bookie's son that looks like Fester impersonate Fester to then swindle the Addams to take all their treasure or their property or their fortune, which is kind of a convoluted plot.
Yes.
And then it kind of, at times you forget about it when they have all these different scenes going on. And then it seems like it wasn't the intent from the start for Fester to have actually been Fester, who got amnesia while in the Bermuda Triangle 25 years ago. And some woman adopted him essentially as he was an adult, pretended to be his mother, and used him to be the strong arm for her bookie business. It's like very convoluted and very coincidental.
Yeah, it's way more complicated. The only thing that I think that I sort of appreciate it, which is maybe even unintentional, was that, and they kind of allude to it in the dialogue, but like the way the Addams see the world and the way he operates too, Fester, like you could see why he was drawn to her as far as like swindling people and stuff.
Yeah.
Just because like they enjoy,
doing all
inflicting pain and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like you can see like, oh, okay, I can see why he was easily manipulated into doing this, because that's kind of their whole deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you have like, if you take that element out, like all of the other stuff is great. And it's funny like reading like up on it. Apparently like the I forget how you pronounce it, Marushka or whatever, the dancing scene got cut down some from what it was in the original edit. About that. But then I think that like having it be that Fester actually was Fester did make it way too coincidental and self-contained and small and things like that.
But as a kid, I'm like, I need Fester in this.
But
you know what I mean? Like,
the
has to be Fester.
The feeling, if it was, this isn't really Fester, but we're going to adopt him into the family anyway and let him join. That's a fun message that might sell a little bit better today.
Yeah.
But back then, you're like, but it's not the real Fester.
Yeah.
And then you would leave out the mystery of, well, where is Fester? And then is that the sequel? Then there's
Fester's
two
Quest.
Festers. And then you would just have Christopher Lloyd like playing the same character, like split screen, where they would just have everything over the shoulder with stand-in.
No,
this is a little bit too like not exactly, but the Brady Bunch, was that the sequel? Whenever did you guys watch that a lot too?
I mean,
the movies. I saw the movies. I don't remember.
I watched both. Those Addams Family I watch like all the time. Anytime it's on or whatever, I just play it. But I believe it's the sequel one, because those two are so similar as well. Like they came out back to back, and you kind of start mixing up some of the bits because it is a lot of bits. But essentially, the mother, her ex-husband comes back because she thought he was dead. That's what the whole deal was. Both their parents, because the people didn't get divorced back in the 60s, so they were both died or whatever. And he comes back, and basically it's an imposter that pretends to be her ex-husband because she has like this valuable horse or whatever that's worth a lot of money. Yeah. Again, same thing. Like,
kind of a goofy plot element.
Yeah. Which I'm sure was, I don't know if that was a plot.
What I always like about the Brady Bunch movie is it was current era.
Yes.
But they were still stuck in like
which is the same thing, kind of like, oh, we don't know that, this we're weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they don't.
Because you had these kind of like TV revivals, because you had like Addams Family, Brady Bunch. And then, like, later years, you had the Starsky and Hutch one and Bewitched and, like, these different TV series that it was kind of like a little trend over about a 10-year period of time, or more like 15 years.
Yeah, because Starsky and Hutch came out in 2004.
So you had, like, movies where that happened. But I think that the Addams Family best captured what the original property was, because Starsky and Hutch felt like a Ben Stiller, Owen Wilson comedy.
A lot of them are like tongue-in-cheek looks at it. Even Brady Bunch is like, oh, let's make fun of it. You know, like a lot of them are like, oh, let's make fun of it. And that's what I mean. Like the humor, it's like, no, we're not making fun of it. This is what it was seemingly from the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, and
so
that's
it
what's
felt
so
like
great about
an extension of the original concept.
Yeah, it wasn't really poking fun at it. Something that this all, and it's just because Christina Ricci's in it, I guess, because it's a comic strip based, like Casper. Because Casper came out in '95.
Oh yeah, so Casper was another
Yeah,
one.
I went to theater to see that.
Yeah,
Also, my
and
grandparents took me.
We also probably all remember the Pizza Hut, how tied in it was with that, and you got the little glow in the dark Casper puppets, but they were plastic. But I just remember that, and it's like, it makes me want to go back and watch Casper, because I haven't watched that movie. Remember the stupid PlayStation game that was so damn hard on Casper? You remember that? We just had to get the different keys and go into the rooms.
You know what's fun? I watched Casper not that long ago. We watched it every night. You know what's so funny? You mentioned that. When I remember walking out of the theater at Casper with my grandparents, and I think it was a time in my mind I started thinking about, you know, just the way marketing and merchandising work. I was walking out of the theater thinking, you know what? I bet they're going to make a video game of that because people will buy it. I remember thinking that walking out as a kid.
They
Like,
had a video game of it, and it was like really difficult, and it was like on the PlayStation, or maybe it was on Nintendo 64.
Because when did Casper even come out?
I think it was a PlayStation.
So yeah, that would have been like the era, and that would have been the era too, where PlayStation games weren't always very good.
Yeah, I just remember not being very good. I remember you played it, and then you just got
tie-in games often weren't very good to begin
But
with.
I just want to go back and watch that movie now, because I have not watched it in so long.
And two, that
and
movie,
I remember liking it.
That movie pulled off the weird task of having the crossover event with a Ghostbuster as Dan Aykroyd showing up. And I think today's world, that would be a much bigger deal, because back then it was played as a gag. Like, I don't think that was canonical to the Ghostbusters.
No.
it had only
universe.
been like 5 years or something
From
since the last
Ghostbusters
one.
2.
Yeah, I mean, like it hadn't been that long.
So I remember that it was just Dan Aykroyd, and that was it.
Yeah.
Was he in the Ghostbusters game?
Yeah.
Yes,
He
and he
comes
came out,
downstairs
and he's
with him.
like, who are you
Yeah.
going to call someone else, as he left?
Yeah, because I remember that, and I remember like Chong was in it or something. It was like a priest, and he got his neck turned around backwards, and then like Rodney Dangerfield, because Bill Pullman's like in the mirror doing something, and like Rodney Dangerfield's like, you know, his skit.
So, but then, like, but I think that the Addams
Clint
Family
Eastwood was in it too.
I think that the Addams Family helped. I mean, there may have been one before that I'm missing, but I think that property, adapting an older property from a TV series or a comic strip from years back, I think that did make, because Casper was like a cartoon.
Yeah.
It wasn't a live action series. So I think it just inspired people to want to go back to all these properties and like, oh, let's relaunch this and remarket it to kids now.
Wait, nostalgia?
Yeah. And it's really started to eat its own tail now, because there's some stuff that's like nostalgia-based properties in and of themselves. Like, when's the Stranger Things reboot going to happen?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
God.
but now you have, like, well, I guess like the Stephen King stuff, like Pet Sematary, they're always going to remake Stephen King stuff.
Yeah.
But it is funny how we get in these kicks of the properties that they really push and remake.
We kind of they are making Addams Family's coming out this year, which is animated.
With an animated version that's like Oscar Isaac, Charlize Theron.
Which is funny, because a lot of people, there was always like
Nick
meme
Kroll, I
stuff
think.
floating around where they wanted to see Oscar Isaac as Gomez. So now he's doing it.
Well, there was a meme. It was him and Eva Green and some other, like they had mocked up all these images of them looking like the characters, and they did look like good representation.
Well, it's funny because now though Christina Ricci's old enough,
she could play Morticia.
yeah, she could play Morticia, which I think would be kind of an interesting
that would
full
be
circle.
funny.
But I don't know if they would go that route or not. But like, if they ever do a live action one, I'll be interested to see, because the cast for the animated seems solid. I mean, you got Charlize Theron, you got Oscar Isaac, you got Nick Kroll. You have Chloe Moretz, if that's how you say her
Chloe
name.
Grace Moretz.
Yeah, Moretz. And you got a bunch of notable people in there, so I don't know what production company's doing it or what, but...
Yeah, it comes out October 11th.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's Finn Wolfhard, who is from Stranger Things, will be Pugsley. Like there's other people like Allison Janney, Nick Kroll is Fester, Bette Midler is Grandma. So they have a pretty good voice cast.
So the director of Shrek 2, Monsters vs. Aliens, Sausage Party.
Hey, look,
Madagascar.
Shrek 2 almost made $1 billion.
The fact that they're making it's somebody involved with Shrek and then Sausage Party makes me think that
A plus.
Well, no, just
Yeah.
because Sausage Party,
This
whatever.
isn't this isn't somebody some quick production company got the rights.
It's just Sausage Party was like a more adult themed thing, so it makes you think like maybe there'll be some more edge to this and won't be so sanitized. Because
I think with the Addams Family, you have to have some edge.
Always,
to it.
it's always had some sort of edge, and that's what even this has edge to it. But it's not like anything of like it cues kids in on like subversive dark humor without being R-rated, that like cutting off heads on screen. You know what I mean?
This
like,
to me kind of falls in the vein of like Beavis and Butthead or Ren and Stimpy or stuff like that, because there's enough stuff that the kids can be entertained, but as a parent or an older person, you can watch it too and still be entertained.
Yeah, as an older person.
Yeah, as an older person, like because I think that's kind of like Marvel does that too. Like you have to have stuff for kids, and the older audience is going to be there. You don't want to just have it too adult, because then you limit your audience. And if you have it too kiddie, it's like then nobody wants to watch it.
Yeah.
So you have like a very precarious mix. But I think so. The original, so like we've already talked about the performances. Like I think that Ron Julian and Angelica Houston were perfect. They even if you didn't have them come front of mind when you thought about who you're going to cast for it, they were perfect for that movie and kind of made that iconic for an entire new generation. Like Christina Ricci as Wednesday was great. Very memorable. Like the kid that played Pugsley, I don't remember as much, but
I think he was great in it though.
He was very good in it. There's just a little little bit less memorable things for him, and he didn't go on to have, at least that I'm aware of, as much of a career as like Christina Ricci, where he
only did 2 movies.
I think he did a couple more. He got back into acting, I believe. Pugsley. I was looking like at the cast of apparently Ariel Winter or something from Modern Family.
That's his sister.
Yeah.
I was looking to it earlier. I was just looking at the cast because I wanted to see, like, I was like, what was he doing? Then it's like, oh, okay, that's his sister. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and I was forgetting. So the Corey Feldman thing in the 90s, that wasn't Addams Family. That was the Munsters.
Okay, it's that.
Because the Munsters, Eddie Munster, he wears like the shorts and stuff.
Yeah. Was that the like TV revival, like the TV show?
Yeah,
or was
where they tried to bring it back.
There's apparently a skit that Conan O'Brien and Ben Stiller did, where Ben Stiller's an adult Eddie Munster, and he's like really pissed off all the time because he's Eddie Munster, but he still dresses like Eddie Munster as a kid.
Seen that.
Yeah, because I listened to the Conan podcast and they were talking about it, and it's like what got Ben Stiller.
I feel like Eddie Munster was maybe around like one of the Fright Nights years ago or something.
Yeah,
I feel like he was hitting something.
And then if you follow college basketball at all, there was like a coach they said was Eddie Munster is the guy that is Oklahoma City's Thunder's coach now or something.
Oh, Billy Donovan.
Yeah, Billy Donovan. Like, it was,
so it's funny how like with the Addams Family, a lot of it stuck around pop culture.
Well, Wednesday Addams is probably as popular as a pop culture character as that, because she's always relevant.
That's another thing about this film. I always forget characters' names, but this one is like I've always known everyone since I was a kid. You know what I mean?
Because I think everybody knows Wednesday Addams. Yeah. Like Fester,
Pugsley. Gomez, Morticia. Like the names
everybody has names that stick out, but that are not far fetched. Because recently I was on
a bunch of Harry Potter names.
I was on a podcast. And the movie was
Dungeons and Dragons.
And it's like Jeremy Irons' character's name is like Profifri, or some like made up garbage name. It's like, this is really hard to remember. And because a lot of times you do fake names, you get to a point where it's just, this is hard to keep track.
J.R.R. Tolkien, I think he nailed the blend, the mix of like,
because like the Lord of the Rings films, like Frodo and and Aragorn, a lot of those are not so out there that they're hard to remember.
Well, they sound like names that you hear of like old, like medieval type.
Yeah.
But where it's like you get into some stuff and it's like,
Profion. Jeremy Irons was Profion.
And it's like, that's
Yeah, so it's just funny how like Gomez and Morticia, all those names, they sound normal. Like it doesn't sound too.
Yeah, you could see like somebody having the name of like, especially like Gomez, or now Pugsley's a little different. But like Wednesday,
it's a cartoon name and it worked. It's memorable. It's memorable. Like in your mind, you see Pugsley when you say that. Like Wednesday Addams. Like everybody just that was this. I feel like Addams Family was so ingrained to everybody's mind, like collective, conscious of pop culture in the 90s. Right.
We named our cat after Wednesday Addams. Yeah, she's a black cat. Like, oh, name her Wednesday. So it's just like that's. And whenever we take her to the vet, they're like, oh, Wednesday Addams. Like, yeah. So it's just like everybody knows the Addams Family, even though they haven't had anything Addams Family since like 93 or something.
The podcast I was on was Kill Screen Cinema. I forget. Like I've had a lot of brain farts today. So you can check that out if you want, because they have like all the main podcast places. I was on there to discuss.
I started listening
Dungeons
to it, but
and
I haven't
Dragons.
finished yet.
But yeah, like
speaking of that, I used to play. This is another one that I rented the game afterwards on Super Nintendo.
Oh, the Addams Family.
Yeah, I was like, you play as like Gomez, like jumping around the house, like on the exteriors and stuff. You might play as other people too, but yeah, this was just like, I don't know what it was about the Addams Family. Again, as a kid, I did watch the Munsters maybe more.
Well, it seemed like to me the Munsters were more readily available because it was like TV Land or Nick at Night or whatever. So
I
it
remember
seemed like it was on
and
more
it appeals more
frequently.
to kids. I mean, Herman Munster was kind of a kid. You know what I mean? Like he would throw
Fred
temper
Gwynn.
tantrums and stuff. Like he was just, and they were the monsters. You know, it's like, oh, there's Frankenstein. You know, Grandpa,
And then like their niece or whatever would come over who was like an attractive normal woman. They'd be like,
Again.
oh, she's so disgusting.
Again, that's why everybody, I mean, like they knew what they were doing when they were remaking the Addams Family, essentially making that show.
Well, because like I think the Addams Family, at least the movie, the characters gave a little more room because I don't think people were as rooted in. Because like with the Munsters, Fred Gwynn is what you think of immediately as Herman Munster. I don't think the Addams Family was quite as rooted in the original portrayals.
Well, I couldn't tell you anybody. I don't know of any of the people that are in the original. You know,
Oh, you know who played Gomez, and I'm drawing a blank on his.
if I saw him. But see, I always remember when I think of that. I always remember the Munsters. I remember the Uncle Vampire. I don't know what his name was, but
Yeah, it's funny because like you forget who some of these actors were. Because let's see, so John Astin.
John Astin.
Was Gomez, and he was a pretty iconic portrayal. And he's been in other things. He was like what, Attack the Killer Tomatoes or something. Oh, he was the voice. I know he's the voice in the cartoon.
Yeah.
And
He's
then
Sean Astin's father.
okay,
Which I didn't know that until recently either.
Yeah.
Did you see a picture of him yet?
no.
Like, I know you know who he is. I just typed in the Addams Family and
and he was voices like on All Real Monsters. Let's see, he was on Briscoe County Jr.
Oh yeah,
he's in Gremlins too.
Yeah,
You know, so he really did stick in my mind as Gomez before this movie.
Yeah, so he was in a bunch of stuff.
Well, it's funny because like the
Night Court.
now the guy they got to play because they almost have like their like butler's almost like Frankenstein. It's never really
Lurch a little bit. Yeah,
Lurch.
which who was the tall man from Twin Peaks?
Yeah, but like
he was the only one that returned for Addams Family Reunion.
Yeah.
Which had Tim Curry, and that was the only other notable person I think in that movie.
But yeah,
I watched some of that. I think I watched it on YouTube a couple years back.
I remember seeing it
because I was like,
and
I've
then-
got to see this.
I just remember like it used to come on something, and you'd watch it, and even like I don't. Arrested Development season 4 is not as good, but there's a scene where like George Senior goes somewhere with Oscar, and he's got friends. Again, my friends is like, I don't want these, and that's like how I felt like watching this movie as a young kid. It's like, no, I don't want this.
Yeah.
I don't. No.
I watched quite a bit of it. And I was like, it's not the worst thing ever, but man, you can't compete on a
like
TV budget. You know what I mean? Like a TV.
And like Tim Curry's great.
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
just it's hard to.
I do think they made a somewhat wise decision with the Addams Family they're coming out with this year to be animated instead of live action because you're not living up to the original like the 91 film. You're doing your own thing.
Yeah.
But, and I'm totally fine with it animated because animation can be really great. But, you know, honestly, at this point, though, we're going to be approaching 20 years away from that. I mean, you know, they will be targeting, you know, 20-year-olds in the audiences. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it, and that definitely did inspire, like, you know, I'm a flavor of Hot Topic, but like I'm more a flavor of that hot. You know what I mean? Like that sort of like more of the films that have that vibe.
Well, because you have like a certain era from like Nightmare Before Christmas, like you had like the Tim Burton stuff, and then this because I think a lot of people who like Tim Burton stuff also liked Addams Family, and by Tim Burton stuff I mean like leading up to like Batman Returns and then kind of dropping off there because there's like a lot of his Disney work and Johnny Depp work is a little bit different.
I never even watched all of Nightmare on
Night Before Christmas.
Night Before, like I've seen a lot of parts of it, but I never made me want to sit.
So here's the thing: like I've watched it and I enjoy it, and I like the characters and the animation style and the stop motion.
Musical?
I mean, yeah, but it is enjoyable and fun. But I think a lot of it, like the iconography of the characters, like Jack Skellington and stuff, that endures more than the movie itself.
Okay, yeah.
And remember, like I always remember James and the Giant Peach, but that was just a movie that he produced. He did not direct it, but it's very much.
Well, he didn't direct Night Before Christmas either.
Yeah, he didn't direct that one.
But it's still Tim Burton's Night Before Christmas, isn't it?
Yeah, he produced it, and did he even co-write it, or did he write that?
Because I also remember like James and the Giant Peach. I don't know why, because they used to come on like all the time for Thanksgiving. And I don't know why they would play that, because I don't even think it has anything to do with Thanksgiving. I just remember that being a movie that would come
I don't
on.
know.
Yeah, it was directed by Henry Selick, but Tim Burton was credited with story and characters.
So he didn't actually write the script. He just worked on the story and characters.
And you had like Danny Elfman score and stuff. So I mean, like a movie that has a lot of love for it. Just like a lot of stuff from that era, like Beetlejuice, Nightmare Before Christmas. You know, even the Batman movies, really, and like Addams Family. And then I want to lump it in there, even though it has nothing to do with any of those. Bram Stoker's Dracula, just a lot of movies from the era remind me of each other. And when I watch one of them, I kind of want to watch the others. But yeah, then like after a certain point with Tim Burton, when he went with the much larger budgeted, well, I mean, Batman was big budget, but like the post Sleepy Hollow set of movies that he did.
I like Sleepy Hollow.
Oh, and two, I think I've heard recently that essentially the Beetlejuice sequel is dead.
Oh yeah,
happen.
look, it was never going to happen because I'd read a bunch about it, and then like there's nothing.
It seemed like too much licensing. It seemed like too much to get everybody back.
I don't know if it was that. I think there's too much time has passed, and I just don't think they could ever really agree on a script. And because like I think what happened, you have Beetlejuice and musical, which is going on. It's either going on right now or it's been recently since it's happened. And I think that kind of brought some more buzz about remaking or doing a sequel to Beetlejuice. And
Michael Keaton's been getting a lot. You know what I mean? Like Oscar, nominations and everything in the past.
Well,
5
he's,
years.
what was the old phrase? You either die a hero, live long enough to see yourself become the villain. So he went from being Batman to being a bad guy in Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Yeah.
And apparently he's still around the MCU, so he might show up again. But like, that's a movie that I don't know that we need to see, because I don't know that it would actually turn out super well at this point.
Well,
just because
yeah.
I can't think of many belated sequels that turned out to be solid.
Well, you're talking about a movie that, depending on when it come out. When did Beetlejuice come out?
Like, I would have to look, like 89 or whatever.
89.
It was,
Yeah, so you're talking about, it'd been 30 years since that. So you're talking about a 30...
Yeah, or no, it was 88.
Yeah.
So it'd be like...
Over 31 years. So you have a sequel
31 years later.
Yeah, and that would just be if it started production today. It wouldn't be out till next year or 2021.
See, here's what I want to see. I want to see Jeff Goldblum go to the Beetlejuice house.
Oh, no. I want to see Jeff Goldblum as Beetlejuice.
No, I want to see I want to see Jeff Goldblum with Beetlejuice, and he's like, Beetlejuice. Like, just imagine him like in his current day state, and they let it be mostly
ad lib and just let him do.
They let it be improv.
It'd be a mess of a film,
and yeah, that would be amazing. But back to the Addams Family. So the movie, like I think we've already said, like the performances and the characters and all that stuff is amazing. The story's kind of the weak point. So what would we give this out of 10?
I mean, I really enjoy it, and I love like Christopher Lloyd's Fester's is great. Like it might, which is kind of sad because like he always gets remembered as Doc Brown, but I might enjoy him better as Fester.
And he gets a lot to do.
He gets a lot to do, and just one of my favorite scenes.
In the sequel, he gets a lot to do.
Yeah,
as well,
in the
too.
sequel,
like, he's also basically like kind of the central.
Yeah, and but I think one of my favorite scenes in the movie is just when he's like unpacking his box of killing machine.
Like, oh my god, I'm caught.
Yeah, and they're just like normal, but like I'm 8 out of 10. It's something that I think I could watch endlessly. Like I could just, if it's on, I'd watch it. It's something you can put on the background. I think you could take most audiences, young and old, doesn't matter, and they could get some enjoyment out of it because it's paced really well. The only thing that the humor that dates is like
the Sally Jesse.
Yeah, but there's still stuff that exists enough now
but you
that
don't need to know what she is to get that joke.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it all works.
But you still have
also
like
has the typical 90s, late 80s, early 90s thing of having a hip hop theme for the credit sequence.
Yeah.
Because what was it, like MC? Was it MC Hammer that did it?
Yeah.
Maybe, because I think they did a music video with
But it just
the
like
creepy and the kooky.
Yeah. It just hits enough of the beats of like everything you want.
Yeah, so it was ironic enough as having a hip hop song as the theme, but not having anybody in the movie that's not white in any type of major role. That's something that you don't see happen as often anymore.
I mean,
Ninja Turtles also.
Like, well, they had, if you have Vanilla Ice, that doesn't really count.
Well, I'm talking about the first one.
Yeah.
The end of the first one was they had their rap song or whatever. But
yeah,
I think the score in this is also great. Apparently, too, they were like, I would have like been so mad as a kid if they wouldn't have put in the Addams Family theme. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because as a kid, like, yeah, I knew that from the show, everything.
Yeah, I think everybody knows.
And apparently it wasn't in the film until they showed like they released the trailers and got such strong reaction that Barry Sonnenfeld ended up putting it in the movie. But it's like, why wouldn't you have done that? Like, just go all the way. You know what I mean? You're like 99% there. Just put that in there a little bit.
It might have been because to get the theme from the show required a little bit of extra licensing.
Oh, yeah.
And they're trying to work around that, but then they just had to go ahead and bite the bullet and do it.
Apparently, too, one of the producers of it, and some other people, they were all someplace. I don't remember what they were doing, but anyway, they all got in a car to go somewhere, and somebody had their kid with them.
Yeah,
or they were all there, and their kids. One of the kids started singing the Addams Family theme, and they got in the car, and they all knew the theme, and he got thinking, he's like, let's just make an Addams Family movie, and that's how it all got started. It was like some kid said it, and I guess because he knew, like, hey, that is such a culturally ubiquitous thing. Like, everybody knows what the Addams Family is. Even though it's an old property.
You'd have like Halloween music, like the Addams Family's always.
Because I think too, like throughout the course of the movie, there's a bunch of delays because like the DP quit, and then Barry Sonnenfeld, like his wife got sick, and then Ron Julia had a burst blood vessel in his eye. So it got over budget and it got over schedule, and then Orion Pictures that had started it sold it mid-production to somebody else, and a lot of the people involved with it didn't even know that had happened. And then I think that there was like international distribution rights are owned by like MGM or something, so there was like a split thing between like Paramount and MGM. Like, so all this kind of behind the scenes stuff. Kind of a troubled production, but then you wouldn't know that watching it.
Yeah, I guess Barry Sonnenfeld, he had 2 DPs, and then he ended up just finishing it himself, which he did a great job. Like, it all feels seamless. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this doesn't feel like a movie that had all the issues that it did, because it's a good movie.
And what a first film. That must have been so much pressure. Apparently, too, I was reading the trivia that he was talking to one of the producers, and they were talking about the ballooning budget, and he said he felt an immense pressure on his chest, and he ended up passing out. You know, because I can imagine that pressure. Well,
and too, like, you go and you read stuff about Hollywood, and like this is going differently, but this is going to Wayne's World, and they'd already had success with Wayne's World 1, which is like a massive success. And it turns out that when they wrote the sequel, Mike Myers had pulled something from another, like a British TV show, and then like the producer of it or whatever, like the person that worked for the studio, like told him that she's going to ruin his life and he's going to take his
my God.
And like he like got in the fetal position and cried on the couch.
Oh yeah.
So it's like you hear all these like horrible stories in Hollywood, and like especially on these, like, you know, even though like Mike Myers is a huge name now, he wasn't then, and but like this guy started out Barry
Sonnenfeld.
So like you gotta figure, like, when you're doing that, like, you have
all this stuff's going wrong. You're losing your DPs. You got to do 2 jobs at once on your first directing job.
Like, I mean, not that it's that much easier now, but that was also in the film days. Like, there was more to a lot of the camera handling and all that than there is in the digital era, because you did have people whose sole job was to eject the film film reels and to replace the film in the camera and to load it and all that stuff. As opposed to now, it's all just like,
you got your DITs now that do it now, though, and I'm sure he had camera operators. I'm sure he had to operate a camera.
No, he did every single thing.
Because we've done stuff where, you know, we've directed and shot at the same time. We're doing like digital cameras. We don't have the level of complexity that a Hollywood production has in any way, shape, or form.
Still stressful.
But if it's your first feature film being directed, it's a big budget studio project. That is a lot of pressure.
People are breathing down your neck about the budget and everything.
Because like Robert Rodriguez like shoots and directs all his own stuff, but that's like his kind of shtick and what he wanted to do from the get go, and he did it for cost reasons. Yeah. It wasn't,
but he's a name now too.
I don't know if he did his own cinematography for Alita. I would have to look that up, but I would be surprised if he did, because that was like so much effects work, and that would be like all the complicated camera movements and stuff that's beyond just.
He's kind of been teaching a lot of that stuff as he goes. You know what I mean? He's like baby stepped into that as far as like doing Sin City. You know what I mean? Spy Kids. Didn't he do some CGI stuff? Some CGI.
Oh, movies? So Bill Pope was a cinematographer, not Robert Rodriguez on Alita.
So I was just thinking, like, who would be the worst director that you could pick to redo a live action Addams Family movie?
So there's some people, if you talk about the usual suspects out of the horror world, like Rob Zombie would make a really weird one. I don't know.
I don't want them, because it would be like they would be murdering people,
or like like Eli Roth. I'm not sure what he would do with it.
It would be murdering people.
But in terms of like modern directors, I would want Taika Waititi, because I think What We Do in the Shadows was a great balance.
I want who's Paul W.S. Anderson. I want him to direct, because he would.
Mila Jojovich's every role.
She would be Morticia, but she wouldn't be Morticia. She'd be like Maury or something, and it'd be like just enough.
Yeah,
it'd be
change. Like, why did you change that?
It wouldn't be the Addams family. It'd be that like you know what I'm saying? It'd just be a little.
It would be
bit
the
of
Addams family, but it takes place down the street, and you never get to see the house.
Yeah, you never get to see the house.
Well, then all the main members of the Addams family show up in small cameo roles in the sequels.
Yeah. And it takes place mostly in a basement.
So we're referencing the Resident Evil franchise.
And Alien vs. Predator.
And how the Resident Evil franchise did sprinkle in a lot of the game characters and small cameo roles later in the films. But yeah, so giving this a score out of 10, like at the time I saw it as a kid, it was like a 9 or a 10 out of 10. Like I loved it. Nowadays, I still think it's like an 8 at least. It's still enjoyable and watchable, and it holds up, and you can watch it and have fun. And like you said, aside from like the TV show like host thing, like most of it's pretty timeless because they didn't really put much technology in or anything in it. So yeah,
it's all like social humor, which is, you know what I mean, going to be like that sort of stuff's going to be funny till the end of time.
Well, yeah,
you know what I mean? Like it's
because
all,
it works.
Yeah,
you watch like the original Shrek, and there's a lot of references to pop culture.
Yeah.
This one really doesn't have pop culture references. You know, a lot of movies have pop culture
and too,
references.
like the thing too, they're not even part of the normal world. Like they are divided from it enough to where it's like its own thing. So it's like that can never age. You know what I mean? Like I'm not saying it can never age, but just the very nature of it will keep it fresh longer than if it was you know, I don't know, you know. I mean, the people are going to be selling propane, but I was thinking King of the Hill. You know what I mean? Like just something where somebody has a job that will age out or something like that.
Well, that's what's kind of, there is like nice stuff in there where like, I think like, you know, Addams Family kind of works in any decade because you can find ways to make that work.
And you can make it, you can play the humor against the decade every time.
And I think like the monsters would work, you know, if they want, which is just weird. They never even intended. I think you could probably still do Casper. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to remake Casper. And what's the guy that takes his shirt off and yells at Ghost?
Oh, Zach Brannigan.
I want Zach Brannigan to make a cameo. Like, come fight me, Casper. Yeah, Zach Baggins. And take his shirt off. And be like,
Brannigan, that sounds like...
I'm going to harm myself if there's not a ghost here. You know, and
he's like, do you see how shredded I am, Ghost?
It's a horror movie and Zach Baggins is chasing Casper around the house.
That would be awesome. But, and you're like, there's just certain things you can watch from the 90s and that doesn't really... It still works. Like I still really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think this aged so well.
It's where both podcasts we've done back to back, like both movies aged, I think, very well. You know, we just covered Land of the Dead, and
So Sean, did you give this?
No, I mean, like as a kid, as a kid, you just think I love that movie. That's all I thought, you know. And I'm still the same. Like this is almost. It's just one of those films I saw when I was so young and just had such a love for it and loved the show before it and stuff that. I don't know, like a 9 or 10 or whatever, only because I can put this on or the sequel and just love it every single time. Yeah. Like, you know, there's immense value on that. Like on a personal level, like this is up there for me as far as I mean, because it's so unique too. You know, the type of humor and the comedy. It's not like. You know, not like we don't see this everywhere now or a lot of places now, but it just the tone of it is just so specific and like razor thin. It walks a certain line and it does it perfectly that it just makes it such a special film.
I think too, like since it's so macabre, like it works because like this, even though it wasn't original property at the time, it still felt really fresh and original.
Yeah,
and now like you've had a lot of time for things to kind of pull from this and mimic it and. You know,
see how perfect it still did it back then.
How perfect it still did it, and there's nothing.
And as stupid as like the plot kind of is, like normally that would just the plot's dumb or you know just can destroy a film, but it's like no, everything else is so good, it just keeps that plot up where it doesn't matter. You know,
the plot is somewhat unimportant. It mostly just serves to set up a few set pieces.
The plot, like we said, doesn't really make.
Well, think about it.
I heard somebody say too when we're talking about plot and story. I was listening to something about the difference between story and plot, and it's like. You know, story is what's important. It's basically how the characters are affected by the plot. Like, you know, how their reaction to it and how you see humans deal with situations. And this is all about their situation dealing with it. And so even though the plot's stupid, the story's good because it's so many great moments.
I think too, like, because you see where Fester gets closer with the kids and he starts to become.
You love that,
himself. And I think that's why it would have been disappointing if he wasn't the real Fester. So I think that maybe worked better because it's like, well, at least he's like, you know, he's just blowing stuff up and he's just telling him how to use dynamite and just like. And this show kind of also reminds me of like Courage the Cowardly Dog a little bit because if he like flew to the
I love that show.
Like Courage kind of went on the macabre where it was I don't know, kind of the same vein. It was like comedic.
It was like Monster of the Week, but
I just, there's certain stuff that I watch and like, I like this and that. And, you know, like it does make me, it's funny how you can watch something like this and, you know, talking about nostalgia. It makes you look fondly on other stuff. So like, I kind of want to go watch Casper now, see if that's still even.
Yeah. We need to do Addams Family Values around Thanksgiving this year. Only because we don't want to do them back to back. And there's at least that great Thanksgiving
But that's like,
that.
and that's just one of those movies. It's like, I do remember seeing that at Thanksgiving a lot, I guess, just because it's set around or has those moments. And you have all the kids getting roasted. So
I guess that can wrap up our discussion of the Addams Family. If you're listening via iTunes or whatever podcast app you're listening to, do us a huge favor and leave a review. It helps other people find the podcast. You can always send us emails at podcast@housebyvideostore.com or leave comments everywhere. We always enjoy seeing YouTube comments or social media.
Just tag us comments everywhere.
Yeah. We find everything we're doing at housebyvideostore.com. Find links to all of our social media accounts, to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff. Make sure to follow us on YouTube, because we've seen a spike in subscribers recently, driven by our short film that Chad directed, Plucked. We're going to do a sequel to it called Pluckted. Plucked it, or that's a joke, but I'm so funny. But yeah, so we'll have all our stuff we're posting out there. And if you want to find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Instagram at the William Caps.
Find me at MetaWorld Eric.
And I'm at Blevin Sean on Twitter.
And that'll wrap up this episode of the House by VSR podcast. Thanks for listening.